The September evening air carried that perfect California chill that made running feel like flying. Kara Thornwood's feet struck the pavement in measured rhythm, each step a meditation, each breath controlled and purposeful. The tree-lined streets of San Diego's Maple Grove neighborhood passed in familiar patterns, modest homes with warm lights glowing behind curtains, the occasional dog walker, the distant sound of a television through an open window. To anyone watching, she was just another woman in running gear. 5'3", 120 pounds, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. The kind of person you'd pass without a second glance. That was exactly how she preferred it. What the neighbors didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that the petite woman jogging past their homes at 20:45 hours could kill a man in 7 different ways before he realized she'd moved. That she'd spent 6 years as one of the first women to complete Navy SEAL training. That her hands, which looked delicate in the glow of streetlights, had held weapons in places where mercy was a luxury no one could afford. The memories came unbidden as she ran. They always did during these evening sessions. The weight of the ocean during Hell Week when her lungs screamed for air and her muscles turned to lead. The instructors who'd watched her with skepticism, waiting for her to quit. The moment she'd placed that trident on her chest and truly knew that she'd earned something that couldn't be taken away. Then the darker memories. The Afghan sand that got into everything. The compound in Kandahar where everything went wrong in the space of 5 seconds. The radio call that ended with her team leader dead and her finger on a trigger making decisions that would replay in her mind for years afterward. That was the moment she'd earned her call sign, Raven. For the way she'd moved through that compound like a shadow with talons silent and absolutely lethal. 12 hostiles down before extraction arrived. The citation used words like valor and decisive action. What it didn't mention was the way her hands shook for 3 days afterward. 3 years out now. 3 years of trying to convince herself that civilian consulting work filled the void. The money was better. The hours were manageable. She didn't wake up at 0300 anymore reaching for weapons that weren't there. But the restlessness never left. That feeling of waiting for a mission that would never come. Her watch beeped as she completed mile 2. She checked her pace, 7-minute miles, easy and sustainable. Her breathing remained controlled, her heart rate elevated but comfortable. The route would take her through Pine Avenue around the park, then back to her apartment in the Gaslamp Quarter. Same pattern she'd run for 3 months. Predictable, safe. Safe was supposed to be the goal now. That's when she noticed the black Cadillac Escalade. It was parked at the intersection of Maple and 4th Engine, running windows tinted dark enough to violate California law. Not unusual by itself, plenty of people kept their cars running while they waited for someone. But something about the positioning triggered instincts she'd spent 3 years trying to quiet. The vehicle sat at an angle that provided clear sight lines down 3 different streets. Perfect surveillance position. The driver's side window was cracked exactly 3 inches, enough for observation, not enough to be obvious. And the license plate, even in the fading light, was positioned in a way that suggested it might be deliberately obscured by a tinted cover. Kara maintained her pace and kept her expression neutral. Just another jogger, nothing to see. But her mind shifted into tactical assessment mode, automatically cataloging details the way she'd been trained. California plates. 7 Golf Hotel X-Ray 492. Black Escalade, current model, year after market tint job that cost serious money. 2 silhouettes visible through the windshield, driver and passenger. The way they sat suggested size and weight. Both large, both watching her. She ran past without breaking stride, but her peripheral vision caught the moment the driver reached for something. Radio maybe, or phone, communicating with someone. 1 block later, she tested her theory with an unplanned right turn onto Pine Avenue. If they were just waiting for someone, they'd stay put. If they were following her, they'd adjust position. 30 seconds later, the Escalade turned onto Pine Avenue. Kara's heart rate increased, but not from exertion. The familiar sensation of pre-combat alertness flooded through her system. Adrenaline sharpening her senses. Time seeming to slow down. Every sound becoming distinct. The hum of the Escalade's engine, the distant bark of a gun, her own breathing that remained deliberately controlled despite the spike of tension. She'd been in the private security world long enough to recognize professional surveillance. This wasn't some random stalker or amateur criminal. The vehicle choice, the positioning, the deliberate tail boss, this was organized. Funded. Trained. The question was why. Her current contract negotiations with Marcus Webb flashed through her mind. The oil executive with fingers in Middle Eastern petroleum and enemies in Russian smuggling rings. She'd done her research before the initial meeting. Webb's testimony before Congress could trigger RICO indictments worth hundreds of millions. The kind of money that made people willing to kill to protect it. She'd asked Webb directly during their first meeting, "You understand what you're asking for. Protection details against organized crime aren't the same as keeping overeager fans away. These people use military tactics. They have resources. They will kill you if they get the chance." Webb had waved off her concerns with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never faced real violence. "That's why I'm hiring the best. Your reputation speaks for itself, Lieutenant Thornwood. 6 years with the teams, multiple combat deployments, Blackwater Strategic Solutions top consultant. If someone comes for me, I want you standing between us." The money had been substantial. $2 million annually plus hazard pay and full operational authority. Enough to set her up for years. Enough to maybe stop feeling like she was wasting the training that had cost her so much to earn. But if Webb's enemies were already moving, the contract hadn't even been signed yet. That meant they'd been tracking her for weeks, researching her capabilities, looking for vulnerabilities. The Escalade maintained position exactly 50 yards behind her. Professional distance, close enough to keep eyes on target, far enough to avoid appearing threatening. Whoever was driving had training in mobile surveillance, the kind of training that came from intelligence services or elite military units. Kara's mind raced through options. She could break pattern completely, head for a crowded area where witnesses would force them to back off. She could call Detective Garrett at SDPD. He'd been her liaison for consulting work and would respond immediately. She could abort the run entirely, get back to her apartment where she had weapons and secure communications. But something made her keep running. Maybe it was the part of her that missed the action. Maybe it was professional curiosity about how far they'd push. Or maybe it was simple stubbornness. She'd spent 6 years proving she belonged in rooms where no one thought she did, and she wasn't about to let some surveillance team spook her off her own running route. 2 more blocks. The Escalade followed like a shadow. Then it accelerated. The sound of the engine changing pitch triggered immediate response. Kara's legs moved before her conscious mind finished processing the threat. She angled toward a parked car, putting metal between herself and the approaching vehicle. Her hands came up in a defensive posture that would look like startled civilian reaction to anyone watching, but was actually the opening position for a dozen different combat techniques. The Escalade didn't hit her. It cut her off. The vehicle swerved across the intersection and stopped at an angle that blocked her escape route. Doors opened before it had fully stopped moving, practiced efficiency that confirmed her assessment. These weren't amateurs. 3 men emerged. The first was huge. 6'2", minimum 240, moving with the controlled precision of someone who'd spent years in gyms and training rooms. Dark jacket, dark pants, the kind of anonymous, tactical casual that blended everywhere and nowhere. His face was weathered and hard, with the flat expression of someone who'd done violence and felt nothing about it afterward. As he stepped into the streetlight, Kara caught a glimpse of tattoos on his neck. Cyrillic script, the kind that carried weight in certain circles. Russian prison tattoos. Bratva. The second man was smaller, but no less dangerous. 5'10", lean and wiry with scarred knuckles that told their own story. He moved like a boxer weight on the balls of his feet, ready to explode in any direction. His eyes tracked her with predatory focus. The third stayed at the vehicle driver position engine, still running, maintaining their exit strategy. Professional discipline. The big man spoke first. His accent was thick, Eastern European, probably Moscow or further east. "Miss Thornwood, please, we do not wish to make scene. Someone requires conversation with you. Very important conversation." His hand rested near his waistband in a way that wasn't casual. Armed. The smaller man had positioned himself to cut off her escape route to the left. The driver maintained visual contact through the windshield. They'd practiced this, rehearsed it. This was an extraction operation, and she was the target. Kara forced her voice to remain steady. "I don't know who you think I am, but you've made a mistake." The big man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "No mistake. Lieutenant Kara Thornwood, 6 years Navy SEALs. Buds Class 342, only woman to complete your training cycle. Serve 3 combat deployments. Current employment, Blackwater Strategic Solutions, private security consulting. Negotiating protection contract with Marcus Webb oil executive, scheduled to testify before Senate Intelligence Committee in 5 days. Each word landed like a physical blow. They knew everything. How long had they been watching? How deep did their intelligence penetration go? Now the big man continued, pulling out a manila envelope. We show you something. Then you make very simple choice. He opened the envelope and pulled out photographs. Even from 5 feet away, Kara could see they were surveillance shots. Her apartment building, her car, her grocery store, the gym where she trained, Blackwater's offices in downtown San Diego. Then the last photograph made her blood turn cold. It was taken earlier today. Bridget, her younger sister, leaving the Berkeley campus library. The timestamp read 14:30 hours, 5 hours ago. The photo was high-resolution, professional quality, taken with expensive equipment by someone who knew what they were doing. Pretty girl, your sister, the big man said conversationally. Graduate student economics degree. Very smart. Lives alone in apartment near campus. Walks home same route every night after library closes. Very predictable. The implied threat was crystal clear. They'd done more than surveillance. They'd established patterns, vulnerabilities. They were telling her that Bridget could be taken anytime they wanted. Kara's hands had curled into fists without her realizing it. Years of combat training fought against the surge of protective rage that threatened to overwhelm tactical thinking. They were using her sister as leverage. Standard intimidation protocol. Make it personal. Make it hurt. What do you want? Her voice came out flat and cold. Very simple. You cancel contract with Webb tonight. You call him now, tell him you cannot accept position. Then you walk away. Forget you ever met him. Forget everything about his testimony, his evidence, his plans. And if I refuse, the big man's expression didn't change. Then we take sister first. She disappears. Then we take you. Then we take Webb. Everyone loses. Very unnecessary. Very messy. Better you make smart choice now. The smaller man had moved closer during the conversation, cutting off angles. The driver's door opened slightly, ready to extract if things went wrong. They'd boxed her in. Professional work. The kind of operation that came from organizations with resources and experience. Who sent you? Kara asked, though she already suspected the answer. Does not matter who sent us. Matters only that you understand message. Webb is dead man walking. Everyone who helps him becomes dead also. You are young, you have future ahead. Sister has future. Why throw away for oil executive who testifies, then forgets you exist? There was logic in it, the kind of cold calculation that organized crime used to manage their operations. Eliminate threats with minimum violence. Offer exits before resorting to force. It was more efficient, less risky, and it worked often enough to be standard procedure. But they'd made a critical error in their risk assessment. They'd researched her record. They knew she was trained, but they'd assumed that training would make her cautious. That knowledge of what violence looked like would make her avoid it. They didn't understand that some people ran toward the sound of guns instead of away from them. I need proof, Kara said. Proof that you can actually do what you're threatening. Otherwise, this is just talk. The big man frowned slightly, thrown off his script. Proof we show you photographs. Photographs mean nothing. Could be photoshopped. Could be old images you pulled from social media. I need to know this threat is real before I make any decisions. It was a stalling tactic, but it was also information gathering. She needed them talking, needed to assess their capability and rules of engagement. Were they authorized to use force immediately, or were they under orders to keep this quiet? The big man seemed to consider this. Then he reached into his jacket. His hand emerged holding a black Beretta M9, standard military sidearm. The weapon came up smoothly, professionally, with the kind of casual familiarity that came from years of practice. And then he pressed the cold steel barrel directly against Kara's right temple. Time seemed to crystallize. The metal against her skin was shockingly cold. She could feel the perfect circle of the muzzle, could imagine the bullet waiting just inches away. 9 millimeter. Hollow point probably. Designed to expand on impact. Instant death if he pulled the trigger. The big man's face was inches from hers now. She could smell cigarettes and coffee on his breath. This real enough for you? His voice had gone quiet, almost gentle. You want proof? Here is proof. I press trigger, you die. Simple mathematics. Now you take phone call, web cancel contract. Or I make sister receive package with your brain inside. Your choice. Make it now. The smaller man had drawn his own weapon, a Makarov pistol, Soviet era, but well-maintained. He'd taken position behind Kara, covering his partner's action. The driver remained at the vehicle, but she could see him now, wiry, nervous energy hand inside his jacket. 3 armed men. Professional positioning. Kill zone established. Any civilian would have complied. Any rational person would have calculated the odds 3-1 already at gunpoint. No backup, no weapons. Sister's life at stake, and made the smart choice. But 6 years as a Navy SEAL had taught Kara something that civilians never understood. The most dangerous moment in any confrontation wasn't when someone pointed a gun at you from across a room. It was when they got close enough to touch you. Because if they were close enough to touch you, you were close enough to touch them. The big man was making the same mistake that had gotten people killed in training scenarios 1,000 times. He thought the gun against her head gave him absolute control. He thought proximity meant dominance. He didn't understand that he just put himself within her disarm radius. Kara's breathing remained controlled. Her hands stayed visible and non-threatening. Her voice came out shaky, exactly the way a terrified civilian's would. Okay, I'll call him. Just don't hurt my sister, please. The big man's expression shifted slightly. Satisfaction, dominance established, threat delivered, target complying, mission nearly complete. That micro-expression of relaxation was all she needed. Her left hand moved first. Not a grabs were too slow, too easily countered. Instead, her hand came up in a sharp vertical strike that redirected the Beretta's barrel away from her head. The weapon discharged an ear-splitting crack that echoed off the residential houses, but the bullet went harmlessly into the night sky. Her right elbow was already driving forward into the big man's throat. The trachea crushed under the impact with a sickening crunch. His eyes went wide with shock and sudden inability to breathe. Her hands gripped his wrist, the one holding the Beretta, and twisted against the thumb, the weakest point in any grip. The joint lock was brutal and efficient. Something in his wrist snapped with an audible pop. The Beretta clattered to the pavement. Total elapsed time, 2.4 seconds. The big man was falling, clutching his throat, making horrific choking sounds. Kara was already moving, scooping up the Beretta even as she processed the next threats. The smaller man behind her was reacting, but he was half a second slow, fatal in close quarters combat. His Makarov was coming up when Kara pivoted and brought the big man's body between them as a shield. The Makarov fired. The bullet that was meant for Kara struck the big man in the upper chest instead. Blood sprayed. The big man's choking sounds turned into a wet gurgle. Kara let the body fall and fired twice. Center mass the way she'd been trained. The smaller man dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The driver was already moving his own weapon, clearing his jacket, but he was 12 feet away, emerging from cover against a trained operator who already had her weapon up and sighted. Kara's first shot took him in the right shoulder. He spun with the impact. Her second shot hit his weapon hand, sending his pistol spinning away. Then Kara was moving forward, weapon trained on him, her voice carrying the cold authority of someone who'd given orders in combat zones. On the ground, face down, hands behind your head. The driver complied, screaming in Russian, clutching his wounded shoulder. Blood was spreading across his jacket, but the hits weren't immediately fatal. He'd live if he got medical attention. The big man was still alive, barely making wet gasping sounds, and staring up at the sky with glazed eyes. The bullet to his chest had hit something vital. 40 seconds, maybe a minute before he bled out. The smaller man wasn't moving at all. Both shots had found their mark. Kara stood in the center of the street, surrounded by 3 men she'd just shot. Her breathing finally elevated from something other than exercise. The Beretta felt heavy in her hands now that the immediate action was over. The chemical rush of combat was already fading, leaving behind the cold clarity of aftermath. In the distance, she could hear sirens. Someone had called the police. Multiple gunshots in a residential neighborhood tended to get fast responses. She carefully placed the Beretta on the ground and raised her hands, making herself as non-threatening as possible. When the police arrived, she'd be the woman in running gear standing over three armed men. Better to establish compliance immediately. Her shoulder hurt where she'd been grazed by something, probably concrete fragments from a round that missed. Her hands were shaking slightly now, adrenaline aftershocks. But she was alive, functional, mission capable. The big man's eyes found her one last time. He tried to speak, but only blood came out. Then his gaze went empty and fixed. Kara stood there, hands raised, waiting for the police to arrive, and allowed herself one single moment of something that might have been regret. Not for defending herself, that calculation was simple and justified, but for the fact that three men were dead or dying on a quiet San Diego street because someone powerful had decided Marcus Webb needed to die. This was just the opening move. She understood that with absolute certainty. Organizations like the Bratva didn't send three men and then give up when those men failed. They escalated, they adapted, they came back with more resources and better intelligence. Whatever she'd just walked into, it was far from over. The first patrol car rounded the corner, lights flashing, siren wailing. Kara remained perfectly still, hands raised, waiting to explain what had just happened, and knowing that the explanation was going to sound completely insane. She'd just killed three Russian mobsters on a residential street in San Diego while out for an evening jog, and somewhere whoever had sent them was already planning the next move. The night that had started with a simple run was about to become infinitely more complicated. The interrogation room at San Diego Police Department smelled like stale coffee and decades of bad decisions. Kara sat in a metal chair that had been bolted to the floor sometime in the 1980s, her hands resting calmly on the scarred table surface. The paramedics had cleaned and bandaged the concrete fragment wounds on her shoulders, superficial. Nothing that would slow her down. Her running gear was streaked with blood that wasn't hers. She'd been here for 90 minutes. Standard procedure after a shooting, even a justified one. They'd taken her statement 3 times, each iteration recorded and documented. Professional courtesy dictated they treat her as a witness rather than a suspect, but the protocol still had to be followed. 3 dead men required explanations, even when those men were armed Russian mobsters who'd been stupid enough to press a gun to a Navy SEAL's head. The door opened. Detective Wade Garrett walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee and a thick file folder. He was 58, with the kind of weathered face that came from decades of seeing humanity at its worst and still showing up for work. Former Marine Force Recon Lebanon veteran, Gulf War combat action. The kind of cop who understood the difference between violence and necessary force. "Thought you might need this," he said, sliding 1 coffee across the table. "Fair warning, it tastes like battery acid mixed with despair." Kara took the cup anyway. The warmth felt good against her hands. Wouldn't be a police station without terrible coffee. Garrett settled into the chair across from her with the careful movement of someone whose knees had logged too many miles in hostile territory. He opened the file and spread several photographs across the table. Crime scene documentation. The 3 men exactly where they'd fallen. Viktor Molotov, Garrett said, tapping the photo of the big man. Age 32. Russian national, entered the country 6 months ago on a work visa that our friends at ICE are very interested in. Multiple arrests in Moscow for assault and extortion. Known associate of the Sonskaya Bratva. And here's the interesting part, his brother is Dmitry Volkov. The name meant nothing to Kara, but Garrett's tone suggested it should. Dmitry Volkov used to be Spetsnaz Alpha Group, the real deal, Chechnya, Georgia, Syria. Took over the West Coast Bratva operations about 5 years ago after the previous leadership had an unfortunate accident involving a wood chipper. He's smart, connected, and absolutely ruthless. If he sent his baby brother after you, this wasn't some low-level intimidation play. This was personal attention from the top. Kara absorbed this information while her mind automatically started building threat assessments. Russian organized crime with military-trained leadership, resources, and international reach. The kind of enemy that didn't stop after one failed attempt. "The other 2, she asked. Alexei Krusov and Dmitry Sokolov, both Russian nationals, both with records in Moscow. Sokolov's actually talking shoulder wound made him cooperative. Says they were hired for a simple job. Follow you, deliver a message, convince you to cancel some contract. He claims he didn't know it would Get violent. He drew a weapon on me. I know. I saw the tactical positioning when I arrived. Professional work, military spacing, coordinated extraction plan. These weren't street thugs. But Sokolov insists they had orders to keep it non-lethal if possible. Garrett paused. Then Victor got creative with the psychological pressure. Put that Beretta to your head. Worst mistake he ever made. And his last. Garrett pulled out another photograph. This one made Kara's chest tighten. It showed Bridget leaving the Berkeley Library unaware she was being photographed. Sokolov had 12 more of these on his phone. Your sister's apartment, her daily routine, class schedule. They'd been watching her for at least 2 weeks. The protective rage that Kara had suppressed during the confrontation threatened to surface now. They'd put eyes on Bridget, her baby sister, who'd chosen Berkeley specifically to get away from the military world, who wanted nothing to do with violence, and operators in the dark corners where people like Kara worked. They'd made her a target just for being related to the wrong person. Is she safe? Kara's voice came out harder than she intended. Already called Berkeley PD. They're doing a welfare check right now. Last contact was at 19:30 hours. She texted a friend about studying late at the library. We'll know more soon. Kara's phone, which had been returned to her after evidence processing, buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen. Bridget's name. Go ahead, Garrett said. Kara answered. Bridge. Oh my God, Kara, what's happening? Bridget's voice was high and stressed. There are police at my apartment asking if I'm okay and saying something about threats, and I don't understand. Well, listen to me. You're safe right now, but I need you to do exactly what I say. Stay with those officers. Don't go anywhere alone. I'll explain everything, but first I need to know you're somewhere secure. You're scaring me. What's going on? I'll call you back in 20 minutes. Stay with the police. Please, Bridge. A long pause. Then quieter. Okay, but you better actually explain this time. Not the usual classified bullshit. The line went dead. Kara set the phone down and met Garrett's eyes. She's safe for now. For now is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Garrett leaned back in his chair. Look, the shooting is clean. Self-defense, multiple witnesses saw them box you in, and 3 armed attackers against an unarmed jogger plays exactly how you'd expect in court. You'll probably never even see a courtroom, but that's not what worries me. What worries you is that whoever sent them isn't going to stop. Exactly. Volkov doesn't strike me as the type who accepts failure gracefully. You killed his brother and 2 of his soldiers. In his world, that requires a response. Probably a very violent response. Kara was already thinking 3 steps ahead. The Bratva knew about her sister. They knew about the web contract. They demonstrated professional surveillance and tactical capabilities. This wasn't going away with a police report and a restraining order. I need to make a phone call, she said. Garrett nodded and stood gathering the photographs. Use the office down the hall, more private. And Kara, whatever you're planning, try to keep it from turning into a full-scale war in my jurisdiction. The paperwork is already going to be a nightmare. The office was small and cluttered with file boxes and outdated wanted posters. Kara closed the door and pulled out her phone. The number she dialed was one she'd sworn she wouldn't use unless absolutely necessary. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. This better be important, Raven. I was 3 putts away from breaking 80. Colonel Everett Blackwell, 62 years old and officially retired from the Navy for 7 years, but retired was a flexible term for men like Hawk. He'd commanded SEAL team operations during the Cold War, survived 2 tours in Korea before that, and spent Desert Storm running black ops that still carried classification stamps. He'd been Kara's commanding officer during her last deployment, the one who'd pinned in her trident and told her she had the potential to be one of the best operators he'd ever trained. He was also the most intimidating human being she'd ever met. I just killed 3 Russian mobsters in the middle of a residential street, Kara said without preamble. They put a gun to my head and threatened my sister. I need advice. A pause, then Hawk's voice came back on all business, the golf game forgotten. Start from the beginning. Leave nothing out. Kara briefed him in the clipped, efficient style of a combat report. The surveillance, the confrontation, Victor's threat, the photographs of Bridget, the shooting itself and its aftermath. Hawk listened without interrupting, the way he always did, processing information and building strategic assessments. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Dmitry Volkov, he finally said. I know that name. Not personally, but through channels. Spetsnaz Alpha Group doesn't produce many failures. If he's running Bratva operations in California, he's doing it with the same tactical discipline he learned in Chechnya. You just killed his brother, which makes this personal, and you're negotiating protection for Marcus Webb, which makes this strategic. Two reasons for him to come after you with everything he has. I figured as much. Here's what you don't know. Webb called me 4 days ago, said he'd been getting threats, needed serious protection, wanted recommendations. I gave him your name, told him you were the best operator I'd ever trained and exactly the kind of professional he needed. You were supposed to be his shield against exactly this kind of threat. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. You set this up. I facilitated an introduction between a man who needed protection and an operator who needed purpose. What you do with that is your decision. Hawk's voice carried the weight of years and battles. But I didn't anticipate the Bratva would move this fast or this aggressively. They're escalating before the contract is even signed. That tells me Webb's testimony must be even more damaging than I thought. What's he testifying about? Russian oil smuggling through the Middle East. Webb's company has been documenting it for years. Routes, quantities, financial transfers, the whole network. His testimony could trigger RICO indictments that would seize $400 million in assets and put 20 high-ranking Bratva members behind bars for life. That's the kind of money that makes assassination not just acceptable, but mandatory from their perspective. Kara processed this. So they sent a street team to pressure me into walking away before the contract was finalized. When that failed, they'll escalate to direct action. Probably hit Webb directly while I'm distracted protecting my sister. That's how I'd do it. Divide your attention. Force you to choose between the mission and your family. Classic strategy, and it works more often than it should. What do I do? The question hung in the air. Kara realized it was the first time she'd asked Hawk for direct guidance since leaving active service. For 3 years, she'd been trying to prove she could operate independently, that she didn't need the structure and support of the teams. But this situation was spiraling beyond her ability to manage alone. First, you accept the reality that this is already a war, whether you want it to be or not. Volkov won't let his brother's death go unanswered. Second, you stop thinking like a civilian consultant and start thinking like an operator. Webb is the mission objective. Your sister is a vulnerability that needs securing. Third, you acknowledge that you can't do this alone. I don't have a team anymore. You have me. I'm too old for field work, but I can still shoot, think, and plan. And I sure as hell am not letting one of my best students face Alpha Group trained killers without backup. There was steel in his voice now. I'm already packing. Give me your location. Something in Kara's chest loosened slightly. She'd been operating in isolation for 3 years, convinced that asking for help was weakness. But Hawk was right. This wasn't a situation where pride and independence mattered. This was combat, and combat required teams. SDPD headquarters downtown. But Hawk, you're retired. You don't need to, Raven. He cut her off with a tone that had silenced briefing rooms full of cocky operators. When I pinned that trident on your chest, I made a promise. I don't abandon my people. Not in Chechnya, not in Kandahar, and sure as hell not in San Diego. I'll be there in 40 minutes. In the meantime, get Garrett to put protection on your sister. Real protection, not just patrol, car drive-bys. The line went dead. Kara stared at her phone for a moment, then allowed herself a small smile. Hawk had that effect, making impossible situations feel manageable simply by showing up. She returned to the interrogation room where Garrett was reviewing paperwork. I need a favor. Why do I feel like this favor is going to cost me sleep and patience? My former commanding officer is on his way here, Colonel Everett Blackwell. He's going to help me protect Marcus Webb until the congressional testimony. But first I need your department to put actual security on my sister at Berkeley. Not patrol checks, real protective detail. Garrett rubbed his face. You're asking for resources we don't really have, for a threat we can't officially confirm beyond some surveillance photos. Viktor Molotov put a gun to my head and explicitly threatened my sister. That's confirmed threat documented by multiple witnesses. The Sonskaya Bratva has international reach and serious resources. They will try again, and next time they won't bother with warnings. Even if I could authorize it, Berkeley isn't my jurisdiction. I'd have to coordinate with their police department, explain the situation, convince them it's serious enough to dedicate manpower. Then convince them. Please, Wade. She's 25. She chose Berkeley to get away from my world. She doesn't deserve to become collateral damage because her sister made enemies in dark places. Something in her voice must have reached him. Garrett sighed and pulled out his phone. I'll make the calls. But Kara, you need to understand something. Police protection is temporary. At best, we can maintain a detail for 72 hours before resources get pulled for other priorities. If this situation isn't resolved quickly, your sister will be vulnerable again. 72 hours is enough. This ends one way or another before then. Garrett studied her for a long moment. That sounds ominously like you're planning something that's going to give me an ulcer. Just doing what I was trained to do, protecting high-value targets from hostile actors. Right. And the fact that one of those hostile actors just lost his brother and probably wants your head on a pike, that factor into your planning. Extensively. Before Garrett could respond, Kara's phone buzzed again. Unknown number, she answered cautiously. Lieutenant Thornwood. The voice was male, accented, cultured. Russian, but with the educated polish of someone who'd spent time in international circles. We haven't been formally introduced. My name is Dmitry Volkov. I believe you met my brother Victor earlier this evening. Kara's entire body went tense. She gestured frantically at Garrett, who immediately started making signals toward the door. They'd need to trace this call record, it'd get technical support involved. But she also needed to keep Volkov talking. I'm sorry for your loss, she said, keeping her voice neutral. The words felt hollow even as she said them. She'd killed Victor in legitimate self-defense. But expressing condolences to his brother required navigating complex emotional terrain. Are you, Volkov's tone, suggested he found her sympathy amusing. I wonder. Victor was younger than me by 8 years. Our parents died in Chechnya when he was 12. I raised him, taught him to fight, to think, to survive. He was impulsive, sometimes let emotion cloud judgment. But he was my blood, my responsibility. And now he's dead because you're very good at killing people. He put a gun to my head and threatened my sister. What did you expect me to do? Nothing different than what you did. You're a warrior. Warriors respond to threats with violence. I respect that, actually. Victor made a tactical error getting within arm's reach. Textbook disarm opportunity. Any Alpha Group operator would have exploited it the same way. Professionally speaking, you performed exactly as your training dictated. The calm analysis was somehow more unsettling than threats would have been. Volkov was assessing her capability, measuring her as an opponent, speaking operator to operator rather than victim to criminal. So why are you calling? Kara asked. Because we find ourselves in interesting situation. Victor's death creates obligation. I must respond or appear weak to my organization. But you're not ordinary target. Former Navy SEAL combat veteran, clearly quite lethal. Killing you would require resources and planning. Meanwhile, Marcus Webb remains my primary objective. His testimony must be prevented. This creates what Americans call a lose-lose scenario. Unless what? Unless we negotiate. You're planning to protect Webb. I'm planning to kill him. We're both professionals. We both understand this ends badly for everyone involved. So I make you offer one soldier to another. Walk away from Webb contract. Take your sister somewhere far from California. In return, I let you both live. Victor's death becomes unfortunate family tragedy rather than the opening move in a war neither of us wants. Kara glanced at Garrett, who was frantically writing notes. Keep him talking, trace active. She needed to maintain the conversation long enough for the technical team to get a location. That's generous, she said carefully, but it doesn't solve your primary problem. Even if I walk away, Webb will just hire someone else. Other security firms exist. Blackwater has dozens of qualified operators. True, but you're the one Everett Blackwell recommended personally. Webb specifically requested the best. If you withdraw, he loses confidence, delays testimony, gives us time to find another solution. Your involvement is obstacle because you're competent enough to actually succeed. Remove yourself, situation becomes manageable again. It was logical from a strategic standpoint. Kara was a known quantity, documented combat experience, Specialized training, proven capability. Another contractor would be an unknown variable, possibly less skilled, possibly easier to eliminate or intimidate. What about my sister, Kara asked. Those surveillance photos suggest you've already invested significant resources in identifying vulnerabilities. How do I know you won't use her for leverage later? You don't. But I give you my word, as former Spetsnaz officer, if you walk away clean, your family stays off limits. I don't make war on civilians unless necessary. Victor shouldn't have threatened her. That was emotional rather than tactical. I'm offering you a chance to step back before this escalates beyond anyone's control. In the background, Garrett held up his phone, showing a text message. Signal bouncing through VPN can't isolate location. Volkov was using sophisticated counter-surveillance technology. Of course he was. I need time to think about it, Kara said. You have until midnight tonight. After that, I assume you've accepted web contract and we proceed accordingly. Understand something, Lieutenant Thornwood. If we go to war, I will use every resource available to eliminate you. Not because I hate you, I actually respect your capabilities, but because you'll be standing between me and a mission objective worth $400 million. Personal feelings don't factor into that equation. One question before you go. Why not just let Webb testify? RICO indictments take years to process. You could be in Moscow or anywhere else before they even file charges. Volkov laughed, a genuine sound of dark amusement. You think like soldier, not businessman. It's not about avoiding prison. It's about the principle. If Webb testifies successfully, other witnesses become brave. Other corporations start cooperating. Soon, entire operation collapses because one oil executive decided to grow conscience. I must demonstrate that cooperation with American authorities has consequences. Webb's death becomes warning to everyone else. You see, I see you're willing to kill a lot of people to protect profit margins. I'm willing to protect operations that employ thousands of people across 3 continents. Webb's individual life versus economic ecosystem that supports families in Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan. Not difficult calculation. But you're military, you understand about acceptable casualties for strategic objectives. The comparison made Kara's jaw tighten. She'd made hard choices in combat, yes. But there was a universe of difference between military operations against legitimate threats and murdering a civilian for testifying to Congress. I'll have my answer by midnight, she said. Good. And Lieutenant, for what it's worth, I genuinely hope you choose wisely. Victor was foolish and paid price. But you have potential to survive much longer if you don't let pride override tactics. Think about your sister. Think about what matters most. The line went dead. Garrett immediately started barking orders to his team about trace attempts and signal analysis. But Kara was already processing the conversation through layers of tactical assessment. Volkov was giving her an out. Standard intimidation, yes, but delivered with calculated professionalism that suggested he'd meant what he said. He was offering her the chance to walk away, not because he was merciful, but because eliminating her would complicate his primary mission of killing Webb. It was actually smart strategy. If she withdrew, Webb would lose confidence and possibly delay testimony. That bought Volkov time to plan a cleaner operation. And from his perspective, one living SEAL in retirement was better than one dead SEAL who'd become a martyr and rallying point for increased law enforcement attention. The problem was that Kara had stopped thinking like someone who could walk away from fights 3 years ago. Maybe she'd never been that person. The door opened. Hawk walked in. He looked exactly as Kara remembered, silver-haired and ramrod straight, wearing civilian clothes that somehow still suggested military bearing. His face was weathered and hard, with the kind of scars that came from decades of combat operations. 62 years old and still moving like a man who could handle himself in any environment. Their eyes met, no words necessary. Hawk assessed her, the bandages, the blood-stained running gear, the expression that said she'd just killed 3 people and received a phone call that complicated everything. Sit rep, he said simply. Kara briefed him on Volkov's call and ultimatum. Hawk listened with the focused intensity that had made him legendary in SEAL community processing information, building strategic models, identifying vulnerabilities and opportunities. When she finished, he was quiet for 30 seconds. Then, he's not wrong about the tactical situation. You walk away, this probably ends quietly. Webb gets different security, possibly less competent. Volkov adjusts his approach. Eventually someone dies, but it's not you or your sister. Classic exit strategy. You think I should take it? I think you should consider it seriously. This isn't your fight, Kara. Webb is a paycheck. Your sister is family. The calculation isn't complicated from that perspective. But, but you didn't call me because you wanted permission to walk away. You called because you're already committed and need help seeing it through. Am I wrong? Kara met his eyes. No, you're not wrong. Hawk nodded slowly. Then we need to shift our thinking. This isn't about one protection contract anymore. Volkov made it personal when he threatened Bridget. Even if you walk away, he knows you exist. He knows your capabilities. He'll always see you as potential future threat. And men like Volkov don't leave potential threats alive if they can help it. So there's no real exit. There's an exit, but it requires eliminating the threat rather than avoiding it. You'd need to protect Webb successfully, get him to testimony, let the RICO process destroy Volkov's organization. Then he'd have bigger problems than one retired SEAL. Garrett, who'd been listening quietly, interjected. That's a law enforcement operation, not a private security contract. You're talking about taking down an international criminal organization. I'm talking about protecting a witness long enough to testify. Everything else is just context. Hawk turned back to Kara. How long until the testimony? 5 days, September 17th, Senate Intelligence Committee, Washington, D.C. And Webb's current location? His estate in La Jolla, cliffside property, probably 8,000 square feet. I haven't done a full security assessment yet. Then that's where we start. You accept the contract tonight. We get to Webb's location and establish defensive perimeter before Volkov can organize a serious assault. 72 hours of lockdown security, then we move Webb to Washington under protective detail. Clean and simple. Nothing about this is simple, Garrett said. Volkov's Bratva. They have resources and people and a willingness to escalate that most criminal organizations would balk at. You're talking about turtling up at a civilian residence and daring them to attack. That's a recipe for a bloodbath. Better a predictable bloodbath than scattered chaos across multiple locations. Hawk's voice carried absolute certainty. Defensive perimeter established fields of fire, limited access points. Force them to come to us on our terms. It's basic tactical doctrine. Kara's phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number, but the content made it clear who'd sent it. Midnight deadline approaching. Choose wisely. Your sister is very pretty when she studies at library. Would be shame if something happened during late night walk home. Attached was another photograph. Bridget taken within the last hour based on her clothing. Same library, same routine. The message was clear. Even with police protection, they could still reach her if they wanted. Kara showed the message to Hawk and Garrett. Both men's expressions darkened. That's escalation, Garrett said. He's applying pressure ahead of his own deadline. Means he's already planning to move whether you accept his deal or not. Or he's testing to see if the threat works. Hawk took the phone and studied the image. Berkeley campus, library, north entrance, based on the architecture. Professional surveillance photo, good equipment. They've got a team already positioned near your sister. Berkeley PD is supposed to be establishing protection. Protection takes time to coordinate and deploy. Volkov's people were already in position. He's staying ahead of your defensive moves. Hawk handed the phone back. Here's what we know for certain. Volkov wants Webb dead. He's willing to use your sister as leverage. He has professional capabilities and resources. The only question is whether you're going to let him control the pace of this engagement or if we're going to seize initiative. Kara felt the familiar sensation of pre-combat decision-making. All the variables assembling into a coherent picture. All the training and experience crystallizing into a course of action that felt simultaneously terrifying and inevitable. We seize initiative, she said quietly. I accept Webb's contract. We lock down his estate and dare Volkov to come get him. And we make sure Bridget is somewhere these bastards can't find her. Garrett sighed. You're going to turn La Jolla into a war zone. Better than letting them pick the time and place. Kara stood. Can Berkeley PD extract Bridget tonight? Take her somewhere secure? I'll make it happen. But Kara, understand what you're committing to. This is going to get ugly. People are going to die. Maybe you, maybe me, maybe civilians who happen to be in the wrong place. People are already dying. Webb's company employees have been having accidents for 6 months, according to the intelligence reports. This situation doesn't get better by running from it. Hawk was already pulling out his phone. I'll contact Blackwater, confirm the contract details, and get his support equipment authorized. We'll need weapons surveillance tech communications gear. How's Webb's estate security currently? Basic. Gates cameras, probably some contracted guards who are mostly there to deter teenagers. So completely inadequate for defending against Alpha Group-trained assault teams. We'll need to upgrade everything tonight. Means no sleep for anyone. He paused. You sure about this, Raven? Once we commit, there's no backing out gracefully. Kara thought about Victor Molotov pressing a gun to her head, about Bridget's photograph with the implied threat, about 3 years of consulting work that had felt hollow and pointless compared to the clarity of actual missions with actual stakes. I'm sure, she said. Let's go to war. Webb's study felt like a trap the moment they entered. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Pacific, expensive abstract art on the walls, a mahogany desk that probably cost 6 figures. The kind of room designed to intimidate business rivals, now hosting a conversation between people who understood violence in ways Webb never could. Volkov settled into one of the leather chairs with unsettling ease. He moved like a man who'd sat in 1,000 rooms just like this negotiating terms, while armed men waited outside. His posture was relaxed but ready, the hallmark of someone who'd survived decades in environments where hesitation meant death. Kara and Hawk remained standing, maintaining tactical positioning near the door. Their weapons were holstered but accessible. Webb had refused to leave the panic room despite Hawk's orders, which was probably wise. This conversation was between operators, not terrified oil executives. You've fortified this place well, Volkov said, his eyes scanning the room with professional assessment. Overlapping fields of fire cleared kill zones, repositioned surveillance. The main hallway, 300 feet of open space, was zero cover. Anyone coming through that door would be cut down before reaching the staircase. Textbook defensive doctrine. Colonel Blackwell's training, I assume. You didn't come here to compliment our tactics, Hawk said flatly. No, I came to propose a civilized solution to an uncivilized problem. Volkov leaned forward slightly. Webb's testimony threatens $400 million in annual revenue. 20 members of my organization face RICO indictments. But that's just money and people. Money can be replaced. People can be replaced. What cannot be replaced is the principle. The principle that witnesses must die, Kara said. The principle that cooperation with American authorities has consequences. Volkov's tone remained conversational, almost academic. If Webb testifies successfully, others become brave. Other corporations start cooperating. Other insiders decide their conscience matters more than their survival. Soon the entire operation collapses, not because of law enforcement effectiveness, but because one man decided to grow a spine. So you need to make an example. Precisely. But here's the interesting question. Does the example have to be Webb's corpse? Volkov let that hang in the air for a moment. What if the example was someone else's failure? Someone within my organization who failed to prevent the testimony, who lost face, who had to answer to our leadership for incompetence. Hawk's expression didn't change. You're proposing to sacrifice someone in your own organization to save face while letting Webb live. I'm proposing that Webb testifies as scheduled. RICO process proceeds. But during discovery, certain key evidence becomes corrupted. Witnesses develop selective amnesia. Chain of custody breaks down in convenient places. The case collapses during prosecution due to reasonable doubt. American justice system's complexity becomes our ally. Volkov smiled slightly. Webb looks like he tried to do the right thing. Your government looks like it pursued justice aggressively, but the end result is business continues with minimal disruption. Kara's tactical mind processed the proposal. It was actually elegant from a strategic standpoint. Webb would get to testify and feel like he'd fulfilled his duty. The government would get headlines about fighting organized crime, but the operational impact would be minimal if Volkov could successfully sabotage the prosecution through corrupted evidence. Everyone would walk away claiming victory while the status quo remained unchanged. Why would we trust you to hold up your end? She asked. Volkov reached into his jacket, slowly making his movements visible to avoid triggering a defensive response. He pulled out a small USB drive and placed it on the desk between them. Complete financial records of my West Coast operations. Account numbers in the Caymans, Switzerland, and Dubai. Transfer records showing every major transaction for the past 3 years. Operational details that would give your FBI everything they'd need to destroy my organization 10 times over. He pushed the drive toward them. You hold this as insurance. If I betray our agreement and move against Webb or your sister, you release it to authorities. I lose everything. My assets, my organization, my freedom. Mutual assured destruction keeps us all honest. Hawk picked up the drive, studying it carefully. This could be fabricated data. Disinformation designed to waste investigative resources while protecting your real operations. It could be, but I'm offering you time to verify before we finalize the agreement. Take it to your intelligence contacts at Blackwater. Run the account numbers. Cross-reference the transactions with known smuggling routes and dates. You'll find everything checks out because it's genuine. Volkov's gaze was steady. I'm offering real vulnerability as guarantee of good faith. That's not something you do lightly in my line of work. The room fell silent except for the distant crash of waves against the cliffs below. Kara felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. This was Volkov offering an exit that saved everyone's face. Webb would testify. She'd collect her $2 million fee. Bridget would be safe, and a major criminal organization would continue operating with minimal disruption, maybe even learning from their mistakes and becoming more sophisticated in their operations. It was the smart play, the professional play, the kind of pragmatic decision that operators made in the field when perfect solutions weren't available and you had to choose between bad options and worse ones. It was also completely wrong. No deal, Kara said. The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Volkov's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Not surprised, he'd probably expected this response. Something else. Respect, maybe? Or recognition of a fellow operator who couldn't be bought or intimidated into compromise. May I ask why? His tone remained conversational. This solution prevents bloodshed, protects your sister, accomplishes your mission objectives. Webb testifies you get paid, everyone walks away alive. By any rational calculation, this is the optimal outcome. It accomplishes everything except actually stopping you. Kara's voice was steel wrapped in ice. You smuggle oil that funds terrorism. You traffic weapons to organizations that kill civilians. You murder people who threaten your profit margins. Webb's testimony isn't just about one case or one legal principle. It's about holding monsters accountable for what they do in the dark. Monsters. Volkov seemed to taste the word. I employ 3,000 people across 5 countries. Their families depend on the operations I run. When American sanctions cut off legitimate trade routes, do you think those families should starve to satisfy Western moral superiority? I provide for people your government abandoned. You provide for people by poisoning other people. That's not noble employment, it's organized murder with extra steps. Volkov stood slowly, smoothly, his movements carrying the controlled grace of someone who'd trained for decades. I made a genuine offer, Lieutenant. What happens next is on your conscience as much as mine. The blood that spills, and there will be blood, could have been prevented if you'd chosen pragmatism over principles. I can live with my principles, Kara said. Can you? I've lived with mine for 45 years. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. Before I leave, professional courtesy requires I tell you something. You have a mole in your defensive perimeter. Hawk's hand moved toward his weapon. Say that again. One of your Blackwater operators is on my payroll, has been since before you arrived. I won't tell you which one, that would spoil the fun. But I will say he's been feeding me intelligence for the past 18 hours. Every defensive position, every weapon placement, every protocol and contingency plan. When my assault comes, and it will come, I'll know exactly where you're weakest. You're not leaving this property alive. Kara said, her hand closing on her Sig Sauer. Of course I am. Killing me solves nothing. My second in command will proceed with the assault regardless, probably with more brutality to avenge my death. But more importantly, Volkov's phone buzzed on. He glanced at it and his smile widened. My team just activated the device your mole planted. You have approximately 90 seconds before the fire suppression system floods this entire mansion with halon gas. The alarm started blaring before he finished speaking. A piercing electronic wail that echoed through every room of the mansion, accompanied by flashing red lights in the hallway. Volkov walked calmly toward the door. The gas is non-lethal but highly effective. You'll be unconscious within 2 minutes of exposure, incapacitated for at least 30 minutes afterward. By the time you recover, my forces will be positioned for the main assault. Professional courtesy. Again, Lieutenant, the attack begins at dawn. 0430 hours tomorrow. You have approximately 12 hours to find your mole, secure your defenses, and prepare for what's coming. He moved through the doorway with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where every defensive position was located. Kara started after him, but Hawk grabbed her arm. Let him go. We have bigger problems. As if to emphasize his point, the distinctive chemical smell of halon gas began seeping through the ventilation system. Kara's eyes were already watering. Hawk keyed his radio. Reynolds Martinez, we have halon deployment. Report status. Static crackled for 3 seconds. Then Martinez's voice came through, strained and coughing. Gas in sections 2 through 5. Spreading fast, we're evacuating to exterior positions. The radio cut out. Kara could already feel her lungs tightening. Halon displaced oxygen, creating an environment where you could breathe, but your blood couldn't carry enough oxygen to maintain consciousness. 60 more seconds, and they'd be on the floor. Balcony, Hawk grabbed her arm, and they ran for the French doors, stumbling as the gas concentration increased. Behind them, they could hear Webb screaming from the panic room. The space's ventilation was connected to the main system. They burst onto the balcony, gasping clean ocean air into burning lungs. Kara bent over the railing, coughing violently. Her vision had started to blur at the edges. Another 20 seconds, and they would have been unconscious. Below them, Reynolds and Martinez were staggering toward the perimeter wall, affected by the gas, but still mobile. Their defensive positions inside the mansion were completely compromised. And beyond the front gate, barely visible in the evening darkness, Kara spotted the glint of multiple vehicle lights. Volkov's surveillance teams moving into position. Not attacking now, just demonstrating that they could strike at any moment they chose. Volkov's Mercedes was pulling away down the private road, taillights disappearing around the curve. He'd walked onto their territory, told them exactly how compromised they were, activated a trap that destroyed their defensive positions, and driven away untouched. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Hawk coughed violently, then keyed his radio on emergency frequency. All personnel, mansion is compromised. Halon deployment in primary structure. Fall back to secondary positions. I repeat, fall back to secondary positions. Kara's tactical mind was already racing through implications. One of their 2 Blackwater operators was a traitor. Volkov had complete intelligence on every defense they'd established. In 12 hours, a Spetsnaz-trained assault team would hit them with overwhelming force and perfect knowledge of their positions. The siege defense strategy was dead. We can't hold this position, she said, her voice still rough from the gas. Not anymore. Volkov knows everything. Every camera angle, every weapon placement, every fallback position. He's turned our defensive fortress into a death trap. I know. Hawk's jaw was set in that expression she recognized from Afghanistan, the look of a commander who just lost his primary tactical advantage and was already building contingencies. Which means we stop defending and start attacking. Before dawn comes, we identify the mole, eliminate that vulnerability, and turn Volkov's knowledge against him. How? By feeding him exactly what he expects to see while preparing something he doesn't expect. Hawk pulled out his tactical tablet, already accessing the mansion's security systems. The mole has been reporting our defensive positions, so we maintain those positions visibly while establishing a hidden kill zone he doesn't know about. When Volkov's assault team comes at dawn, they'll expect to find us where the mole said we'd be. Instead, they'll find an ambush. It was textbook counterintelligence doctrine. Identify the leak control, what information flows through it, use the enemy's intelligence against them. But it required knowing which of their 2 operators was the traitor. Reynolds or Martinez, Kara said. One of them has been selling us out from the beginning. We find out which one, now. Hawk started toward the stairs leading down from the balcony. Get them both to the exterior command post. We run a field interrogation, find our mole, and then we have 11 hours to prepare for the fight of our lives. They descended to ground level, still coughing from residual gas exposure. The mansion's interior was now filled with the white haze of halon, beautiful and deadly. It would take hours to fully ventilate. Reynolds and Martinez were waiting at the command post they'd established in the pool house, a structure separate from the main mansion with its own ventilation. Reynolds was mid-30s, former Delta Force Afghanistan veteran, with a specialized background in explosive ordnance disposal. Martinez was early 30s, former Marine Scout, sniper Iraq and Syria deployment experience. Both looked genuinely shaken by the gas attack. Both had their weapons ready and their tactical gear properly secured. If one of them was a traitor, they were hiding it well. "Colonel, what the hell just happened?" Reynolds asked. "One minute we're maintaining perimeter watch, next minute the whole system activates and we're breathing chemicals." "Sabotage," Hawk said flatly. "Someone planted a device that triggered the fire suppression system. Someone with access to the mansion's infrastructure and knowledge of how to bypass safety protocols." Martinez's eyes narrowed. "You're saying one of Webb's staff?" "I'm saying one of us." Hawk let that statement hang in the air. "Volkov just told us he has an asset inside our team. Someone who's been feeding him intelligence since we arrived. Someone who planted that halon trigger. Someone in this room is a traitor." The accusation hit like a physical blow. Reynolds and Martinez both tensed hands, moving instinctively toward weapons. The pool house suddenly felt very small. "That's insane," Reynolds said. "We're both Blackwater vetted. Background checks, polygraphs, the works. Nobody gets through that screening if they're compromised. And yet here we are." Kara stepped forward, her Sig Sauer held low but ready. "Volkov doesn't bluff about operational intelligence. He knew too much too specifically. One of you has been talking to him. I'm going to find out which one." "How?" Martinez's voice was tight. "You going to torture us? Run some amateur interrogation? We're both trained to resist questioning. This is a waste of time while Volkov's team prepares to hit us." "Not a waste of time," Hawk said. "A necessity, because I'm not going into combat with a traitor watching my back." He pulled out a small device from his tactical vest, an electronic tablet showing financial transaction records. "While you two were establishing perimeter positions, I ran deep background checks through Blackwater's intelligence database. The kind of checks that go beyond standard vetting. Bank accounts, wire transfers, offshore holdings." He turned the tablet toward Reynolds. "You've received 3 payments in the past 6 months, $20,000 each time, deposited into an account in your ex-wife's name so it wouldn't show up on standard financial disclosure. The payments came from a shell corporation in Cyprus that traces back to Sonskaya Bratva front companies." Reynolds' face went white. "That's those payments were from a consulting job. Private security work in..." "The consulting firm doesn't exist. The address is a mail drop. The corporate registration was filed 2 weeks before Volkov sent his brother after Lieutenant Thornwood." Hawk's voice was ice. "You've been on his payroll for 6 months. You were the inside asset before any of us even got here." "Prove it," Reynolds said, but his voice had lost its conviction. "I don't have to prove it. I just have to eliminate you as a threat." Hawk's hand moved to his weapon. "Last chance to do this the easy way. Tell us what Volkov knows, what you reported, what his assault plan entails. Cooperate fully, and you live to face trial instead of execution." Reynolds' shoulders slumped. The fight went out of him all at once, replaced by the hollow expression of someone who knew their choices had run out. "I needed the money. My kid's medical bills, cancer treatment. I couldn't afford it on my salary. They approached me 6 months ago, said all they needed was basic intelligence, nothing that would get anyone killed." "Everything gets people killed in this line of work," Kara said coldly. "What did you tell them?" "Everything." Reynolds wouldn't meet their eyes. "Every defensive position you established. Every weapon cache location. Every contingency plan. The Halon device was my insurance if things went wrong, and you figured me out. I could create chaos and slip away in the confusion." "What's Volkov's assault plan?" "Dawn attack 0430 hours. 2 teams, 16 operators total. Alpha team breaches from the North Cliff. They've got climbing gear and rappelling equipment. Bravo team hits the front gate with shaped charges. Simultaneous breach points overwhelm your defenses. You're expecting maybe 8 to 10 attackers. He's bringing 16 elite operators, all Spetsnaz trained or equivalent." Hawk and Kara exchanged glances. 16 operators was nearly a full platoon. Against the four of them, Hawk, Kara, Martinez, and Webb, it was overwhelming force. Even with defensive positions and superior tactical knowledge, those odds were nearly impossible. Additional details, Hawk demanded. Weapons, tactics, extraction plan. Reynolds detailed everything: the assault timeline, weapon loadouts, communications protocols, extraction vehicles positioned 2 blocks away. He'd given Volkov a complete intelligence package that would turn the coming assault from difficult to catastrophic. When he finished, Hawk pulled out a pair of zip ties. Martinez, secure him. Hands and feet. We'll let the FBI sort out his prosecution after this is over. If we survive this, Martinez said quietly, binding Reynolds' wrist behind his back. 16 against 3. Those are suicide odds, Colonel. 3 against 16, Hawk corrected. Numbers don't determine the outcome. Tactics do. And now we know exactly what they're planning, which means we can plan accordingly. He turned to Kara. We have 11 hours before they hit us. That's enough time to turn this entire property into a kill zone they don't expect. Reynolds told them about our original defensive positions, so we abandoned those positions and established new ones. We used their intelligence against them. Kara's mind was already working through the tactical possibilities. The mansion is compromised and filled with halon gas. We can't defend it, but the property has other structures: the pool house, the guest cottage, the garden shed. We turn those into fortified positions, create overlapping fields of fire across the approaches. Exactly, and we use the mansion itself as bait. Keep some lights on, make it look occupied. When they breach, expecting to find us in VOD, they'll find empty rooms and tripwires. We'll need more firepower, Martinez said. 3 shooters against 16, we need force multipliers. Explosives, automated defenses, anything that levels the odds. Hawk nodded. Reynolds, before you sold us out, you were an EOD specialist. Where does Webb keep his property, maintenance equipment, fertilizer fuel, anything that can be weaponized? Reynolds hesitated, then seemed to realize cooperation was his only option. Garden shed east side, commercial-grade fertilizer, gasoline for the lawn equipment, propane tanks for the pool heater. You're talking about making IEDs. I'm talking about defending a position against overwhelming force using whatever resources are available. That's what we do. Hawk checked his watch. We have until 04:30. Let's make every minute count. The next 11 hours passed in a blur of frenetic preparation. Kara and Martinez worked through the darkness, transforming the La Jolla estate from a luxury property into a tactical battlefield. They established 3 primary defensive positions in the pool house, guest cottage, and a reinforced position behind the garden shed. Each position had overlapping fields of fire covering the likely approaches from both North Cliff and Front Gate. Hawk used his EOD expertise to create improvised explosive devices from the garden supplies. Nothing sophisticated, but enough to create devastating kill zones along the approach routes. Kara repositioned every weapon they had: AR-15 rifles, Remington shotguns, extra magazines of ammunition. She created ammunition caches at each defensive position so they could sustain fire even if one position was compromised. Martinez, using his sniper training, established a hide position on the roof of the guest cottage with clear sight lines across the entire property. They moved Webb from the gas-filled panic room to the pool house basement, a concrete structure that offered protection from small arms fire. He was terrified, but at least now understood that his survival depended on their expertise rather than his money. At 0300 hours, Kara allowed herself a brief moment to check her phone. Text from Bridget: still safe, still angry. But I get it now. Stay alive, okay? She typed back, I will, promise. When this is over, we talk. Really talk. Bridget's response came immediately. You better. I'm not losing my only sister to some Russian assholes. The exchange gave Kara something to fight for beyond the mission. Bridget deserved a sister who came home, who stayed connected, who didn't disappear into operational darkness for months at a time. First, she had to survive the next 2 hours. At 0400 hours, Hawk gathered them for final brief. Martinez at his sniper position, Kara at the mobile defense point between structures, Hawk taking overwatch from the pool house roof with an AR-15 and night vision. They're coming, Hawk said quietly. Probably already in position. We don't get to choose whether this fight happens. We only get to choose how we fight it. Make every shot count. Maintain communications. Fall back to secondary positions if your primary is compromised. And remember, they think they know where we are. That's their weakness. We exploit it. Hooah, Martinez whispered from his position. Kara checked her weapons one last time. Sig Sauer P226 on her hip, AR-15 in her hands, extra magazines in her tactical vest. Hawk had taught her years ago that fear before combat was natural. The key was channeling it into focus. She was terrified, and she was ready. At 0428 hours, Martinez's voice came through the radio. Movement, North Cliff, multiple contacts, 6, 7, 8, Alpha team is climbing. 2 minutes early, professional discipline. They'd approach in darkness breach at the planned time catch defenders in the confusion between sleep and full alertness. Except there would be no confusion. Only violence. Hold fire, Hawk ordered. Let them commit to the breach. Kara watched through night vision as dark figures crested the cliff line. They moved with practiced efficiency, 8 operators in full tactical gear spreading across the north lawn. They carried suppressed weapons and breaching equipment. Their movements showed military training, proper spacing, mutual coverage, tactical hand signals. They were very good. They were about to die anyway. At 0430 hours exactly, the front gate exploded. The shaped charge detonated with a flash that lit up the entire property. The iron gate disintegrated, and 8 more operators flooded through the breach point. Bravo team right on schedule. Both teams converged on the mansion exactly as Reynolds had briefed. They expected to find defenders inside positioned according to the intelligence he'd provided. Instead, they found empty rooms and darkness. Now, Hawk's voice was calm on the radio. Kara triggered the first IED remotely. The explosion erupted in the north lawn, catching 3 Alpha team members in the kill zone. Bodies went flying. Screams echoed across the property. Martinez's sniper rifle cracked once, twice, 3 times. Precision shots from his elevated position. 2 Bravo team operators went down. The assault teams scattered, seeking cover their formation broken by the unexpected explosives. They'd expected a static defense. Instead, they'd walked into a coordinated ambush. Alpha team is falling back to the cliff line, Martinez reported. Bravo team taking cover behind the vehicles at the gate. They're regrouping. Keep pressure on them, Hawk ordered. Don't let them organize. Kara moved between positions, engaging targets as they appeared. Her AR-15 barked in controlled bursts, the training from thousands of hours on the range translating into muscle memory. 2 rounds acquire new target, 2 more rounds. Methodical, efficient, lethal. But 16 operators was still overwhelming force. They were adapting quickly, using suppressing fire to pin down positions while moving to flank. These weren't amateurs panicking under fire. They were professionals responding to unexpected resistance with tactical flexibility. They're pushing toward the pool house, Hawk's voice carried urgency. They figured out where Webb is hiding. 4 operators were advancing under covering fire, moving with fire and maneuver tactics that showed advanced training. They'd identified the pool house as the likely location for their primary target and were prioritizing its capture. Kara broke from her position, sprinting across open ground toward the pool house. Bullets cracked past her head, ricocheting off stone and metal. Her thigh suddenly burned a graze, not a serious hit, but enough to make her stumble. She dove behind cover, then returned fire. 1 operator went down. The other 3 kept advancing. Hawk was engaging from the roof, but his angle was poor, and he was taking fire from multiple directions. Martinez was suppressed by coordinated shots that kept him pinned behind his cover. The assault team was going to reach the pool house. They were going to breach Fine Webb and accomplish their mission, unless someone stopped them. Kara made her decision in the space between heartbeats. She broke cover again, this time running directly at the advancing operators. Aggressive assault instead of defensive hold. It violated every tactical doctrine about not engaging superior numbers in open ground. But sometimes the only winning move was the one nobody expected. She fired on the move, her AR-15 bucking against her shoulder. The first operator went down with 2 rounds center mass. The second tried to pivot toward her and caught 3 rounds that punched through his body armor at close range. The third operator got his weapon up and fired. Kara felt the impact in her left shoulder, a sledgehammer blow that spun her around. She kept her feet through pure willpower and returned fire with her Sig Sauer, her primary weapon now dangling from its sling. The operator dropped, but the fourth was still advancing, and Kara's left arm wasn't responding properly. The shoulder wound was bad, not immediately fatal, but disabling. She couldn't maintain weapon stability with one arm. The operator raised his AK-74, and Kara knew with absolute certainty that she was out of options. Then the operator's head snapped back, and he collapsed. Martinez's rifle spoke once more from his distant position. One more second, and I'd have been too late. Martinez's voice came through the radio, strained. "You okay, Lieutenant?" "Been better." Kara staggered toward the pool house, pressing her right hand against the shoulder wound. Blood was soaking through her tactical vest. Status: Alpha Team is down to 3 operators. Bravo Team has 4 left. They're falling back toward their extraction vehicles. I think they're reassessing whether Webb is worth these casualties. But Kara knew better. She'd studied Volkov's profile. Men like him didn't retreat from missions just because the cost was high. They adapted and escalated. "They're not leaving," she said. "They're regrouping for final push." Volkov knew this might be costly. He committed anyway. As if to prove her point, a new vehicle appeared at the gate. A black SUV with reinforced armor plating. Volkov stepped out. He'd come personally to oversee the mission's completion. "Contact," Hawk's voice was grim. "Volkov just arrived. This is about to get worse." Volkov surveyed the battlefield with the calm assessment of a commander reviewing a training exercise. He spoke into a radio, giving orders Kara couldn't hear. The remaining assault team operators began moving with renewed purpose, their formation tightening. They were preparing for one final coordinated push. All remaining operators focused assault on the pool house, overwhelming firepower, and willingness to accept casualties to accomplish the mission. Kara checked her ammunition. 3 magazines remaining. Shoulder wound making fine motor control difficult. Maybe 10 minutes of combat effectiveness left before blood loss and shock made her a liability instead of an asset. "Hawk," she said quietly, "we need to talk about fallback plans." "No fallback plans. We hold this position or we die trying. That's the mission." "The mission is protecting Webb. If we're all dead, mission fails. We need extraction protocols." "Extraction to where?" Hawk's voice was tired. "Every route off this property is exposed. Webb can't move fast enough to evade pursuit. Our only option is making this stand and hoping we eliminate enough of them that the survivors decide it's not worth continuing." He was right. They'd committed to a defensive stand with no real exit strategy. Either they broke the assault team's will to continue, or they'd be overrun. Volkov's voice echoed across the property, amplified by a portable speaker system. "Lieutenant Thornwood, Colonel Blackwell, you fought well, better than I anticipated. But the mathematics remain unchanged. You are wounded, low on ammunition, and facing superior numbers. My offer stands. Surrender Webb now and you walk away alive. Continue this pointless resistance and I will kill every one of you and take him anyway." "He's trying to break our will," Martinez said. "Standard psyops." "It's working," Kara admitted. She could feel the blood loss, making her thoughts fuzzy. The shoulder wound was worse than she'd acknowledged. Without medical attention, soon shock would set in. Hawk was silent for a long moment. Then, "Raven Martinez, listen to me. What I'm about to say is an order from your commanding officer. When they make their final push, I'm going to draw their fire. All of it. I'll move to an exposed position and engage as many as I can. While they're focused on me, you two extract Webb through the east perimeter fence. There's a walking path that leads to residential streets. Get him to a car, get him to the FBI, make sure he testifies." "Hawk, no." Kara felt ice in her chest. "That's a suicide play. That's a sacrifice play. There's a difference. I'm 62 years old, you're 28. Martinez is 31. Webb's testimony will save lives by destroying Bratva operations. The math is simple. My life for hundreds of potential future victims. That's a trade worth making. I'm not letting you die for this. You don't get a vote, Lieutenant. I'm your commanding officer, even in retirement. My last order is that you complete the mission and survive. That's all that matters." Hawk's voice softened slightly. "You were the best student I ever trained, Raven. Watching you become the operator you are today has been the honor of my life. Now prove everything I taught you was worth it. Stay alive, protect people, pass on what you've learned." Tears were streaming down Kara's face, mixing with blood and dirt. Hawk. No time for sentiment. They're moving. Get ready for extraction. Volkov's assault team was indeed moving, all 7 remaining operators advancing in coordinated formation. They'd abandoned stealth for overwhelming firepower, laying down suppressing fire that turned the night into a light show of muzzle flashes. Hawk stood up from his position on the pool house roof. He stood fully upright, silhouetted against the pre-dawn sky, his AR-15 at the ready. It was the most exposed position imaginable, violating every principle of cover and concealment. Every weapon in Volkov's assault team immediately shifted toward him. "Get Webb out!" Hawk's voice was a command that cut through the chaos. Then he opened fire. His AR-15 spoke in rapid, controlled bursts, engaging multiple targets. 2 operators went down immediately. The others returned fire with everything they had. Kara saw Hawk jerk as rounds found their mark, once, twice, 3 times. But he kept firing, drawing every eye and every weapon toward his position. Martinez grabbed Kara's good arm. "Move now, he's buying us the opening." They ran for Webb's position, pulled him from the basement, and dragged him toward the east fence. Behind them, the volume of fire was overwhelming. Hawk was still shooting somehow, still standing despite multiple hits. Then the firing from his position stopped. Kara looked back and saw Hawk's body falling from the roof, tumbling through the air, before hitting the ground with devastating finality. "No!" She tried to turn back, but Martinez physically restrained her. "He's gone. Don't let his sacrifice be for nothing. Move." They scrambled through the gap in the fence Martinez had cut earlier, dragging Webb into the darkness of the residential walking path. Behind them, they could hear Volkov's voice on the radio, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "Find them. They can't have gone far. Search every street within 6 blocks." But Kara and Martinez knew these streets now. They'd studied the neighborhood during their defensive planning. They knew which houses had cameras, which alleys provided the best concealment routes. They made it 4 blocks before finding an unlock on an old Honda with keys helpfully left in the sun visor by a trusting resident. They were gone before Volkov's remaining operators could organize a systematic search. 3 hours later, they delivered Webb to the FBI field office in downtown San Diego. He was shaking and crying and completely broken by what he'd witnessed. But he was alive. He would testify. Hawk's sacrifice had meant something. Kara sat in an FBI interrogation room. Her shoulder wound, finally receiving professional medical attention. The bullet had passed through clean, missing major arteries. She'd be fine physically. Emotionally was another question. Detective Garrett appeared in the doorway. "You look like hell." "Feel worse than I look." "I'm sorry about Colonel Blackwell. From what Martinez is telling us, he went down like a warrior. Saved all of you." "He shouldn't have had to." Kara's voice was hollow. "I should have found another way." Should have? Should have what? Let Volkov win. Let Webb die. Let terrorists keep getting funded by oil smuggling. Garrett sat down across from her. "Blackwell made the choice himself. Honor it by making it count for something." Kara nodded numbly. "There's something else you should know. We got Volkov. Local police spotted his SUV 40 minutes ago, trying to leave San Diego. High-speed chase ended with him crashed on the freeway. He's in custody now, facing charges for everything: the assault, the murders, conspiracy, racketeering. He's done." For the first time in hours, Kara felt something besides grief. Justice. Cold and imperfect, but justice nonetheless. September 17th arrived. Webb testified before the Senate Intelligence Committee exactly as planned. His evidence was overwhelming, his testimony detailed and damning. The RICO indictments were filed within 24 hours. The Sonskaya Bratva's West Coast operations collapsed. 47 arrests followed in the next week. Hawk had been right. One man's testimony could make a difference. On September 29th, Kara stood at Arlington National Cemetery in her dress blues. The sun was bright and warm, incongruously cheerful for a funeral. Hundreds of people had come, Hawk's former SEAL teammates, officers. He'd commanded operators he'd trained over 4 decades of service. The 21-gun salute echoed across the cemetery, each shot a punctuation mark on a life spent in service. The folded flag was presented to Kara. Hawk's only surviving relative was an estranged daughter who hadn't even responded to the notification. On behalf of the President of the United States Navy, and a grateful nation, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your loved one's honorable and faithful service. Kara held the flag and tried not to collapse under the weight of loss. After the ceremony, a woman in dress blues approached, Captain Hayes, SEAL Team Commander, 51 years old combat veteran, one of the senior female officers in Naval Special Warfare. Lieutenant Thornwood, I wanted to speak with you about something Colonel Blackwell arranged before his death. She handed Kara an envelope. He recommended you for an instructor position at Buds. Said you'd be the greatest instructor we ever had. The position is yours if you want it. Kara opened the envelope. Inside was Hawk's personal letter of recommendation written 2 days before his death. Lieutenant Kara Thornwood represents everything we aspire to create in naval special warfare: exceptional skill, uncompromising integrity, and the courage to face impossible odds. She will teach the next generation not just how to fight, but why the fight matters. I stake my entire reputation on her potential to be the best instructor this program has ever seen. Tears blurred the words. There's also this, Captain Hayes continued. He left instructions for a different option. Joint Task Force position, hunting remaining Bratva cells internationally. NSA support, FBI coordination, multinational operations. Dangerous work, but impactful. He said you'd choose the harder path. Always did. Two choices, teaching or fighting. Safety or continued combat. Kara thought about Bridget, about the promise to reconnect, about Hawk's last words about passing on what she'd learned. I'll take the instructor position, she said. Someone has to teach them right. Hawk would want that. 3 months later, Kara stood on the beach at Coronado. December morning, overcast sky, the kind of cold that cut through the uniform. Before her, Buds Class 348 stood at attention. 140 candidates, 12 of them women, all of them terrified of what the next 6 months would bring. My name is Lieutenant Kara Thornwood, she said, her voice carrying across the beach. Call sign Raven. Most of you will quit this program. Statistics say 70% of you won't make it past Hell Week. The brass bell is right there if you need it. She pointed to the bell mounted on its post symbol of surrender. But for the 30% who make it through, I'm going to teach you something critical. Something my instructor taught me before he gave his life protecting others. She paused, making eye contact with each candidate. I'm going to teach you why you never threaten a Navy SEAL. Not because we're fearless, not because we're superhuman, but because when evil comes, and it will come, we've decided we're the ones who stand in the gap. We fight so that sisters can go to college without being kidnapped. We fight so that witnesses can testify without being murdered. We fight so that good people can sleep safely because rough men and women are willing to do violence on their behalf. The candidate stood a little straighter. Now drop and give me 50 push-ups. Then we run 4 miles. Welcome to Buds. Welcome to the beginning of the hardest thing you'll ever do. And welcome to the start of understanding what it really means to be a warrior. As she led the class in their first beach run, Kara felt Hawk's presence like a hand on her shoulder. Not gone, never gone. Living in every lesson she taught, every operator she trained, every life she touched. She'd pressed forward through darkness and loss and emerged on the other side with purpose. Victor Molotov had pressed a gun to her head and discovered why you never threaten a Navy SEAL. Now she'd make sure a whole new generation understood that lesson, and somewhere she hoped Hawk was smiling.